Now, we've been discussing the fuel situation in Africa. Just a few days ago, South Africa's Department of Energy published the draft biofuels blending regulations. This means that it will be mandatory for biofuels to be blended with petrol or diesel. Still in studio with me are Frank Beeton, consultant at Econometrix, and Avhapfani Tshifularo, Executive Director of the South African Petroleum Industry Association. Gentlemen, welcome back. Biofuels, it's not something a lot of people certainly out there as far as motorists and transport companies are that aware of, is it, Frank?
No, I think in this country there's not been a great deal of thought about it yet. Of course they do exist. As you know yourself, there's been a bus operating in Johannesburg that runs on ethanol fuel, if I remember correctly. This country, of course, has a long history with biofuels, which many of us may not remember. A thing called Union Motor Spirit, which used to be made many, many years ago in Durban from sugarcane, was already in the market and was used by a number of people. But in recent years, I think we've concentrated more on the fuel coming from petroleum stocks.
Certainly globally, Fani, there's a lot of discussion about it, particularly in terms of things like the amount of land that's required to grow crops to produce biodiesel and all sorts of things like that. Is there really a future for it?
Look, I mean, it's something that you cannot avoid. I mean, because as you say, I mean, it's happening in other parts of the world. I mean, people are blending, I mean, the ethanol and the biofuels into, I mean, products, petroleum products. So it has been long overdue. I mean, you will remember that the biofuels industrial strategy for South Africa was published back in 2007. Since then, we have not had anything. So as the industry, we really look forward to contributing to these regulations, because I think it's going to start, I mean, a journey which will obviously make a huge contribution into the South African economy.
But Frank, what's it likely to mean for the people in terms of the trucks they're buying and the technology they require?
Now, the technology is certainly available, and in various parts of the world, various types of fuel mixes are being used in vehicles. So the technology certainly is available, and I think all of the established manufacturers would be able to very quickly respond to the availability of fuel if it is here. I think one of the most important points that one has to think about when one discusses biofuels, in America, for example, the motivation to going to biofuels, apart from the environmental issues, is also to cut down on the amount of petroleum that's imported into the country. And as you know, the Americans are not too keen to import petroleum, especially from countries in the Middle East. So that's why they've driven it ahead. And would have similar benefits for South Africa, obviously, because if we're producing the fuels locally, then it would make a great deal of difference to our balance of payments, for example. So certainly there's a motivation to go ahead. There's an environmental motivation and an economic motivation as well.
Certainly. I mean, Fani, as far as Africa generally is concerned, there's a lot of crops being grown and a lot of biodiesel is being produced on the African continent, isn't there?
Yes, except that, I mean, the way the government want to approach this, they want it to be locally produced, so that you can stimulate the local economy, create jobs. So the intention is not to start to import this ethanol and diesel or biofuel, I mean, from other parts of Africa. So we want to stimulate the local economy. That is why it's there in the industrial policy action plan as one of the areas that we must look as a way of creating jobs in South Africa. So if you look at it, I mean, they are proposing all in all approximately 7%, I mean, of these biofuels to be blended into both petrol and diesel. So that probably is going to increase, I mean, our security of supply, because it means there might be a reduction in the products that we import or crude that we import.
It seems certainly the petroleum industry is going to be very, very busy over the coming years. But Frank, I mean, what sort of time frames are we looking at realistically, do you think?
Well, the time frame, as I think, is dependent entirely on moves from the government and from industry, because, as I said, there's no delay. There would be no delay in implementing it once it's available. So once again, I think the important issue is distribution. You can produce the product, but you need to get it to the point where the user can access it, and that is going to be, I think, the critical issue. Whether the oil companies will become involved themselves or whether it will be separate marketing organizations, that we still don't know. But I think that will be the principal issue will be when the product is available at like your local service station or wherever the selling point is going to be.
Once again, all down to infrastructure, which requires quite a significant investment. Frank Beeton and Avhapfani Tshifularo, thank you very much for joining us.